on X from at Gabe _ Parsons 83.
Mm-hmm.
Sent to us, some other fellows, the Dork Boys. Hey guys, I've got a tough one for you. And then there's a little graphic and it says choose 5 80s movies. The rest will perish. And let's just say every classic 80s movie's on the board.
I think they're missing a couple, but in
They
general, there's a
I'm
good
not
gathering.
gonna waste the folks' time by listing off all these.
It's like 40 movies they gave you.
Yes.
They're missing a couple. An aptly timed tweet as well, considering what we're talking about today, Goo. My 5 that I had to pick, because they forced you to pick 5. I don't know why they wouldn't give us a Goo's Juicy 6.
Also, you know what's weird too? They gave you the option of Empire, but not Jedi.
Yep. So that was one of the ones missing that I was a little perturbed about, but that's neither here nor there.
Right.
If I had to pick the option of picking Jedi over Empire, I would have done that. Goo. Without further ado, my 5 is The Breakfast Club, Back to the Future, E.T., The Empire Strikes Back, Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I think those 5, there was a couple more in there. Those 5 cover so many bases of the ones given to you and are like instant classics in the genre or redefine the genre. I think it's hard to beat that 5.
Okay, and for my 5, I think that you are right with The Empire Strikes Back and Back to the Future. I think that Ghostbusters has to be in there, genre-defining 40-dog movie. And then I'm going to go with 2 personal favorites here. Big is such a fun movie. Tom Hanks is really, this is just before he took that swing towards dramatic acting, still a comedic actor at the time. And then one that I'm excited for September because of it, give me Beetlejuice.
Yeah, I knew Beetlejuice was going to be in your 5. Ghostbusters was in consideration for mine. I gave E.T. that nod just a little bit over it. I'm honestly stunned that you didn't have The Breakfast Club. Like The Breakfast Club, quintessential 80s and like a good combo of music in movies. Like it is, to me, like that. So other than Empire and Back to the Future, I thought Breakfast Club was the easy third one.
So I think if you're picking an 80s John Hughes movie, I might still go Uncle Buck, but Uncle Buck's not an option here. I love Uncle Buck.
Over Breakfast Club?
I love Uncle Buck.
Yeah, I do too. We're not here to disparage Uncle Buck today. That's for sure.
So head over to Twitter right now and find this.
Yeah, I think you retweeted it. You can see it on the account there.
One Goo, 3, yeah! Goo. Jaws 3. Goo. King of Queens. Goo. Meryl Streep. Goo. Entertainment.
I'm Goo.
And I'm Mac.
And we are the Mac and Goo program. We bring you interstellar friendship.
The Empire Strikes Mac.
Woo.
Guess who's back? Back again. The Empire's back. Tell a friend.
That's pretty good.
Goo.
Yes.
Today we are discussing Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back.
And I believe this is the 5th Star Wars movie that we have reviewed.
We've definitely done the new trilogy.
So we started with The Last Jedi.
We did Force Awakens.
No, but we started with The Last Jedi, though. Then we did The Force Awakens.
Mm-hmm.
Then we did Skywalker. Is it Return of Skywalker? I forget what it is.
Yeah.
Then we did The Phantom Menace. Mm-hmm. And now we're on Empire Strikes Back. This is the definitive watch order for Star Wars movies.
We never talked Solo?
Oh, we did do Solo. That was our first one. So Solo first. Right. Go on from there.
And we definitely did Rogue One, too, at some point, didn't we?
We did Rogue One first. Okay, so it's Rogue One, Last Jedi, Solo, Force Awakens, Skywalker, Phantom Menace, then Empire Strikes Back. Stay tuned to find out the rest of the order.
Yes, and we are doing this because Star Wars' new live action series called The Acolyte debuts this week. So it's a perfect time to dive into an all-time great movie, an all-time favorite here on the podcast, obviously. Yes. I would say that The Empire Strikes Back regardless of where you and I rank it amongst the Star Wars movies, is a consensus like top 40 movie of all time, right?
Yeah, this is wonderful. And as a sequel, I think it might be the best.
It's possible. That's definitely possible. That
I think it's a handful of sequels. Yes.
Yeah, that's a good conversation to be had. Maybe a podcast about that.
Whoa, do we have one of those?
Goo, Empire debuted on May 21st, 1980. This
Mhm.
was the Wednesday ahead of Memorial Day weekend.
But as it was released, it was just called
It was called, in fact, at least this is what Wikipedia tells me, is
Wikipedia?
episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back,
No, I thought
which was the first instance that revealed to the people that there was a whole saga behind this and
okay,
not
so
just
guys, head over to social media right now and tell us whose
we
side
don't
you're
know.
on. Okay,
Yeah.
so what I found in my research, I
Okay,
was not alive at the time.
my research is different than yours then.
Okay. I'm citing my sources. I'm going to Wikipedia. You went to Wikipedia. What I saw was that it was called The Empire Strikes Back, and then Star Wars Episode 5 was not added until the re-release in 1981.
I believe it got re-released in 82, first of all, so that might be your reason why yours
That's
is
what
off.
your Wikipedia says. My Wikipedia tells me otherwise.
I believe this in the opening crawl was titled Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back,
It
which
might have
was
been
what clued people off to a wider Star Wars saga for the first time.
okay, so it was
That's
sometime around here. That's all that
going
matters.
off of. But
And
either
your
way,
father still thinks the first Star Wars movie is just called Star Wars.
Yeah. Either way, the episodes were defined between Empire and Return of the Jedi. So by the time you got to 3, you knew it was bigger than 3.
It was clear.
Yes. This movie was reportedly made for a budget of about $30 million. I think the original budget was like 18, but because of
It
overs
ballooned, yeah.
and complications,
Yeah.
went up to 30. Opening weekend plus here, so that first 4, 5, 6 days, whatever, ahead on Memorial Day weekend in 1980. This movie made $6.4 million, which doesn't sound like a lot, but second place was The Gong Show at like $1 million, and then third place was The Shining at like 500,000. So
The Gong Show movie, not just The Gong
yes,
Show.
The Gong Show movie. Sorry. So it doesn't sound like a lot, but that's because it's 1980 and it's really hard to contextualize that for box office today. It went on to make domestically 292 million. I believe the initial run was almost 210 million, and with re-releases, it's made almost 83 million. Worldwide, it made 538 million. But notably less than the first one, which is really interesting considering how much everyone loved the first one. If you were ranking this all time by box office with inflation, this is number 13. The first one is number 2 behind Gone with the Wind all time. So it's hard to fathom, at least in this day and age where the sequel is such a big thing, loving the first movie so much, knowing another one was coming, and then more people not seeing the second movie. Like it doesn't make any sense in my head. But
do you think at the time people just didn't trust sequels?
Yeah, it's the sequel like wasn't really a thing back then. Again, the PG-13 rating wasn't even a thing back then. So this was one of the first movies, if not the first, that proved a sequel in a universe could improve upon the original. It wasn't just some money grab. So you could maybe credit this movie to like expanded universes and whatnot. And just to note, Return of the Jedi is 16th of all time on that same list. Force Awakens is 11th. And the movie, I don't know where Avatar. I forgot to look for Avatar, but Endgame is 15th on that list for inflation's reasons. Like I said, and like we've talked about before on this podcast, this movie is rated PG because PG-13 did not exist.
Not yet.
I think if PG-13 did exist at this time, this probably would have gotten it because it has a darker tone than the first movie. It would have been right borderline on that.
Right, because I believe that in the description, like in the threat, if you will, like the movie threatens this sci-fi violence. I believe that's
Possibly.
what it says.
Yeah, I don't.
Sci-fi violence.
Yeah, you got to pay attention to that as a father now. I don't have to pay attention to any of that shit.
I don't follow rules.
This is a rated PG action adventure, fantasy, and sci-fi. In fact, Wikipedia describes it as an epic space opera, which is very fitting.
Not a genre, but that's fine.
Yeah, but it's very fitting for what especially these first 3 movies
Yeah, but
are.
that's not what it that's not a genre.
No, it's describing what the movie is, though, an
Oh, I
epic
thought you
space
were looking at
opera.
the like the genre.
No,
Wikipedia says
no.
epic space opera.
And I would even actually argue at this point that space opera might be a genre.
If we were still doing Mac v. Goose, slide it right in there.
The original cut of this movie that hit theaters in 1980 had a runtime of 124 minutes. The current version that you can view on Disney Plus has a runtime of 128 minutes. Um, it's actually just over 2 hours when the film's
Mhm.
over. Then, of course, credits and whatnot. So I think that there's only maybe 2 or 3 minutes added of extra stuff in the meantime, if that, and then the rest is all extra credits as well. And that's a whole. We'll get into some of that
Yeah,
today.
we'll get
but
into, like, how they changed it for the VHS DVD,
right,
the
right.
DVD re-release, the Blu-ray, and then for Disney Plus.
Which is honestly a huge part, at least for us, actually
Yeah.
for everyone with this original saga, because our parents knew it one way, and then
Mhm.
a lot of times when they went to go show us when we were kids, they're like, "Wait, that's I don't remember it like that," and it's because Lucas went back twice and changed things from the original trilogy.
Yeah, this one has 2 major changes in the
Mm.
movie. The first one just has, like, a 100 million fucking tweaks.
As is,
Yes.
this movie is pretty much the exact same as it's been since the 2004 DVD release.
Yeah.
He's kind of stopped tinkering since then, but there was like an 8-year window where he did nothing but tinker with these movies. Goo on Roddy T's. This has 95% from the critics, 97% from the audience. When reading about this movie, though, 95% from the critics
It was
seems
middling,
high.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there were critics that straight up didn't like it because it wasn't as hokey or campy as the first one.
It was too
It was
dark.
too dark for them. So I wonder if they just didn't count those or didn't come across those. Again, Rotten Tomatoes didn't exist in 1980, so maybe those are gone. Poof, see you later. And to put some context behind that, A New Hope got 93% and 96%. Return of the Jedi is at 82% and 94%. On Metacritic, Goo, an 82 from the critics, and this reflects it a little bit more. A New Hope got a 90 from critics there, so that shows a little bit of a difference there.
Okay.
58 for Return of the Jedi there from the critics on Metacritic, and that's too harsh, especially since if the main criticism of the second movie is it's not too hokey or campy, the third one gets back to that.
And
So
look,
I don't
I'm
know
not
what
the
they want.
biggest fan of Return of the Jedi, but it's a very good bookend to this 3-part movie.
It's my favorite of these 3, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. It's like I won't say easily, but they're all 40 dog movies to me. But I think Return of the Jedi is my favorite of the 3.
Okay.
And again, critics didn't love the tonal shift from the campy first movie in this like fun universe to a more serious tone in Empire. And then again with Return of the Jedi, the initial reaction a lot there was that it was too lighthearted. Like I
You know
don't
what's funny
really.
though is that, like, watching this movie, it isn't that dark.
It's
not.
not. It's not.
Tonally, it's not. It's just it's a very good continuation of what the first movie was. It wasn't a carbon copy, and maybe that's what they were looking for. They wanted a carbon copy of the first movie, whereas this one flipped it and reversed it. It almost started with the end of the movie and then went to the beginning.
I definitely think it's like for sure the least fun of the 3 though. So maybe that's what they're getting into. It doesn't have like
I
the
don't know,
fun
because
hijinks of like a cantina band, like that type of shit. You know
I
what I
think
mean?
this one might have the best Han Solo stuff, and he is wildly fun in this.
No, I agree. So different
Yes.
levels or different arenas of fun. I agree with you on that. A really fun character, but it doesn't have that camp that the other 2 movies definitely have.
This is driven by character.
Goo, here's a lot of fun facts coming up.
Mhm.
This movie is written by, there's 3 people. Of course, George Lucas is one of them. The other 2 are Leigh Brackett and Lawrence Kasdan. Leigh Brackett was the initial hire by George Lucas, and she went on to die of cancer in 1978, shortly after she was hired, but she had written a first draft of the script. You wouldn't really know her from anything. Like, apparently, she was a pretty popular sci-fi writer who was like pretty keen on dialogue. That's why
Okay.
Lucas hired her. After she passed, Lucas wrote the next draft of the movie where that's where he began to outline this whole Star Wars saga. So it went from a trilogy to something bigger than
And
that.
that's also where it famously became that Darth Vader was Luke's father.
Yeah, And there is a little bit of, well, we'll have that conversation in a couple of minutes because it's interesting to try to pinpoint exactly when that happened. And then after he had written a copy of it, he was also working on Raiders of the Lost Ark with writer Lawrence Kasdan. And in fact, Lawrence hired Lawrence Kasdan to edit and write his script. So those three all got credits on the movie. There was some, I guess, some controversy back in the day that maybe Brackett wasn't going to get a credit from the Writers Guild, but Lucas fought for her, vouched for her,
Good.
and even like fairly compensated the family after her death, which is kind of cool to hear
He's
about.
always seemed like a pretty cool dude.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Also, while writing this movie, which becomes rather apparent now that we've seen Dune, a lot of people hadn't. Maybe at the time people were aware of this. George Lucas's three biggest influences for sort of this saga is The Thing from Another World from 1951, Dune, and Flash Gordon. And I think that's very apparent once you know those other properties, obviously. Also, during this time of brainstorming and writing between the first and second movie, this is where they come up with the idea of the Clone Wars, which obviously comes into account 20 years later. So that's a fun fact right there. And he conceived the character Boba Fett by adapting his original idea of this like super stormtrooper and combining it with like the man with no name Western type of character.
Yeah.
So that's good there. To Lawrence Kasdan, of course, he also writes Return of the Jedi and Raiders of the Lost Ark with Lucas. He's largely responsible for what Yoda became. I think Lucas had Yoda as like a worm originally or some sort of like creature like that. And Kasdan kind of molded it down to this little like elf type of creature. I think it was going to be blue originally. I don't know how they settled on green.
And they made the wrinkles almost identical to Albert Einstein.
Ah, I like that. I didn't know that.
Wisdom.
But the age and wisdom were there from the concept, so Kasdan didn't think that was always there. Also, his first two writing credits on IMDb, Kasdan I'm talking about here, as Empire and Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like
It's a pretty good start.
That's unbelievable.
That's a pretty good fucking start.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
My biggest question, and we didn't talk about it maybe enough when we were reviewing the prequel trilogy, or maybe even, well, we just did Phantom Menace, but when we talk about the prequel trilogy, why wasn't he involved in the storytelling for that trilogy? Because
Maybe
clearly, like, I guess maybe, but then he comes back for Solo and The Force Awakens, so clearly there was something there.
Money.
I don't know about that point in his life if he needed it. That's just weird because
Who
Abrams
doesn't
brings
need
him
more
back for
money?
The Force
Who
Awakens.
doesn't need more money?
He also, him and his son took over the Lord and Miller script on Solo, so he clearly came back for a reason. I don't think it was money, but maybe it was.
I'll say money.
This movie is directed by Irvin Kershner. Lucas famously did not want to direct after the first movie because he was too stressed out. He was more focused on building out Industrial Light and Magic. He hires Kershner because Kershner essentially, because he was one of his former professors at USC, and he knows that he was more skilled in like character-driven stories, which is what they were trying to do from this second movie onward. And apparently the whole pitch to him, because Kershner didn't want to do it, Lucas was like, you have to understand that this is not just a sequel. It's going to be a chapter in a broader universe, which I suppose maybe helped him in there. I also wonder why Kershner didn't do Return of the Jedi, especially after like how well this movie does. It's kind of weird he doesn't come back.
It does seem that his agent made him do it. So maybe he just didn't want to do these types of movies.
Yeah, but you say that, and then he does Never Say Never Again, a Bond movie in 1983, which is like...
So maybe he wanted to do Bond instead.
Sequels to be sequels there.
I know, but maybe he just wanted to do Bond.
And then he does RoboCop 2 in 1990. So Money. He obviously changed his tune.
Money.
Presumably that Bond movie is what kept him from directing Jedi, so maybe he committed to that first. Obviously, the Jedi director becomes Richard Marquand. Reportedly for that movie, because Kershner didn't direct it, there was Alan Parker, John Badham, Steven Spielberg, David Lynch, David Cronenberg. That's one of those ones that I feel like, I don't know if it's more hindsight that they're like, oh, all the popular directors were considered for it, which is a possibility, but I don't know.
I also saw on Wikipedia that Kershner here, he encouraged improv from the actors. So he would do like 3 or 4 extra takes, and one of the improv lines was the "I love you, I know."
Yeah, that's a great combination because simultaneously bringing in a director like this as the three main actors sort of got better at
Mhm.
acting, I think was huge, especially like, you know, the acting in the first movie is fine. The actors in this movie are asked to do a lot more, and I think dove into the
Well, not
characters a
only
lot
that,
more.
at this point, Harrison Ford was full swag. Like, he
Yeah,
was fully who he is, and, like, that might be the perfect line for that character. Like,
so good.
he's great in this entire movie. They give him a ton to do. He's the reluctant hero, but that one line, like, just truly is the character.
If you had to introduce that character or elevator pitch that character to someone that has no knowledge of Star Wars, you would show them the 15 seconds of him going into the carbonite and saying that line. Like that's perfect.
Like, think about this, is that originally, Al Pacino was supposed, or they wanted Al Pacino to play Han Solo.
Jesus Christ. Oh, that would have been awful.
Yeah.
Goo!
Yes.
Synopsis of Empire Strikes Back. After the Rebel Alliance are overpowered by the Empire, Luke Skywalker begins his Jedi training with Yoda while his friends are pursued across the galaxy by Darth Vader and bounty hunter Boba Fett. What we learn from the crawl at the opening of this movie is that even though our rebels have destroyed the Death Star, they are being pursued across the galaxy. A group of freedom fighters being led by Luke, Han, and Leia have established a secret base on Hoth. Vader is so hell-bent on finding Luke that he's dispatched a gazillion of those little droid things that we
Yeah.
see in this movie here to find him. Pretty good. No mention of politics or anything,
No,
you know?
it's a great opening crawl, and then not
Mhm.
only that, it leads you right onto Hoth, and you know exactly where we are, you know exactly where we are on the timeline, and we can just start battling.
Yeah, and speaking of timeline, this movie comes out 3 years after the original and does take place 3 years after the original,
Yes.
so easy to understand that. This movie stars Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker, Harrison Ford as Han Solo, Carrie Fisher as Princess Leia, introduces Billy D. Williams as Lando Calrissian, Anthony Daniels as C-3PO, David Prowse as Darth Vader's body. He's the one in the suit.
Yeah.
Of course, James Earl Jones is uncredited in these first two because he didn't want the credit. He considered what he was doing special effects, but of course, he's the voice. Peter Mayhew as Chewbacca, Kenny Baker as R2-D2, Frank Oz as Yoda, both the voice and doing some of the puppetry. Alex Guinness as Obi-Wan Kenobi is in this movie for
Alec
maybe
Guinness, not Alex
yeah,
Guinness.
Alec Guinness as Obi-Wan Kenobi is in this movie for maybe all of 45 seconds combined, but it's worth it. Jeremy Bulloch as Boba Fett. He got this role, Goo, because he fit the costume.
No.
Not because of any other reason. He fit the costume. Clive Revel is the Emperor in this. Well, is the Emperor's voice in
Yeah.
this. But that got updated in the 2004 DVD version when they put McDermott as the voice and also as the hologram in this. And McDermott was cast for Return of the Jedi, though. So I think that was going to happen regardless of whether Lucas really wanted to tinker or not. And then in that 2004 version as well, Jason Wingreen's uncredited voice for Boba Fett gets replaced by Tamura Morrison's voice. So again, like we said, a lot of tinkering later on.
Well,
too.
I think those are the two biggest
For the sake of
changes.
accuracy, though.
Those are the two biggest changes. Everything else is just sharpening up the movie or
that
making
sharpens it up, though, too.
but look, those are big changes, though. Changing out actors are big changes.
Sure, yeah.
The other ones are like making a monster look a little bit bigger.
Oh,
Or-
no, you know what the biggest change is?
What's that?
The monster on Hoth looks
Yeah.
way fucking better than it does originally.
Well, that's what I'm saying, though, is that they sharpen that up.
Yeah.
And they also, I think, added some CGI around the Falcon to make it look a little more maneuverable.
Sure.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yep. Of course, we can't talk about anything Star Wars without mentioning the music by John Williams.
Mhm.
And especially in 1980 when Industrial Light and Magic and movie making in general just wasn't that great. So the visuals aren't that great.
Well,
So
it's a
what do
lot of
you
stop
need?
motion, yeah.
Yeah, you need sound cues, you need music, and Williams' score does the job and then some in this movie. And obviously, shout out to all those sound editors too.
But I would also say for stop motion, and granted, I did not watch the original 1980s cut for this review. I don't think I've actually ever seen the original one. I think I've seen the 1997 updated one.
I
and then
think
on.
when my father showed me, it was the 97 one on VHS.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I've ever seen the original
So-
either.
I think the stop motion for what it was is pretty great, but also I wasn't around back then.
Sure. But I'm talking about just in general with John Williams
know.
here, So
Yeah.
back to the point you had made above here, Goo, about Darth Vader, and obviously the whole thing surrounding this movie is the audience learns that Darth Vader is Luke and ipso facto Leia's father.
Yeah.
It's a massive, massive reveal. There's no real answer to when that was conceived, though, because on the surface, Goo, Vader translates to father in Dutch. So this was very intentional from the outset by
No one
Lucas.
spoke different languages
But
back then.
yeah, but you don't just call him Vader for no reasons. He claims it was conceived when he rewrites Beckett's script there, which is fine and it's believable to a certain extent. But if you name him Vader, you had the intention of him being someone's father. Maybe Han's, maybe, I don't know. Maybe
Yeah.
not Luke's originally, but it seems like always there was going to be a reveal with Vader. And he's kind of sheepish when it comes to talking about like when he conceived that. I just don't really believe him that it came after the first movie.
Yeah, because from what I read earlier, it seemed like even Mark Hamill didn't know until a day before they shot that. They had dummy scripts out to everybody.
Yeah, even when he gave this, so Beckett's original script didn't include this.
Yeah.
So I wonder if he didn't want to tell her, he didn't quite trust her all the way. And then the script that he gives Kasdan also doesn't include this. And he claims obviously for secrecy reasons, which I totally believe.
Yeah.
But if that's the case, he probably conceived it before the first movie then. Like I think it came when he was writing the first movie, the first original story.
Just imagine, and this is something that I don't think we'll ever experience. Although I guess The Sixth Sense was pretty fucking jaw-dropping, but like having this at the end of the second movie of these two movies that you love, and you're like, oh,
Yeah, right.
We're never going to have that, because even going into the first time I saw this, I knew this.
And even like as amazing and jaw-dropping as Infinity War was, it's based off comics. So we knew that was lurking as a possibility. Most people, I would like to hear a Dutch speaker's take on this movie, because I bet there are people out there saying, I bet he's their father. I bet he's someone's father, because Lord Father is not a very good name in looking back at it. And also shout out Pitch Perfect, because she's like, I don't know if you've watched Pitch Perfect, but essentially one character makes another character watch this movie.
Oh.
And she's like, yeah, of course I knew he was father. Vader translates to father in Dutch. So I wonder when that became a thing too. Like, did people start mystifying it afterwards or whatnot? Goo, I have one last fun fact before you can get to some of your fun facts here.
I have no fun facts.
Oh, okay.
I have a couple.
This is an interesting one, and I think it is a large reason why Lucas has kind of remained in the shadows for the 40 years since he gained notoriety. After the first movie, which also, by the way, most movies prior to these put all of the credits at the beginning of the movie. In the original Star Wars movie, Lucas placed all the credits, including all the crew credits, at the end of the movie to not interfere with the opening. He wanted to do the same thing here, except he wasn't directing this movie. So the Writers Guild of America and the Directors Guild of America did not want that to happen. But because he shot it in Britain, which didn't have that rule, he was allowed to do that. So instead, those guilds fined Kershner, the director, like $25,000 after trying to find Lucas $250,000. Lucas not only paid the fine for Kershner, but left all of like the guilds and associations. He's like, I'm all set with this. But then it made it hard for him to.
He's like Bill Belichick.
Yeah,
I made it hard.
Wow, and it made it hard for him to do other things in Hollywood because he's not a member of WGA and DGA and the Motion Picture Association. So I like that about Lucas. He sticks to his guns. We might disagree with a lot of the shit he says and does, especially with these movies, but at least he sticks to his guns, and I respect that.
I love that. That's great.
Yeah, that's a nice little fun fact there.
I think my favorite thing about this movie, and maybe if I rewatch the first one again, I'll pick up on this as well, is that it seems like no one in the cast knows how to pronounce anyone's name. Right?
Well, you do run into that, being that there's no literature for these movies out there before, and they're also introducing new characters into the universe in this movie, so you just kind of have to run with it.
But it's like no one was there to protect, like, hey, Han, like they say Han a bunch of different ways. They say Darth Vader a bunch of different ways. Obi-Wan a couple times.
Also, Luke still calls him Ben, which I really hate.
I love that. It's his Uncle Ben.
Ben.
We already went over a lot of the changes, and I think an alternate title to this movie should have been Psych Wars.
Oh, really?
Because,
Why is that?
well, they're just psyching out the audience left and right.
One of the other big changes, which we didn't get to speak about, which you actually had here, is along with the Palpatine stuff, they put in the line about the offspring of Anakin Skywalker,
Yeah.
which is also significant because you're now thinking about who Vader was before he became Vader, which we don't get to see that paid off for another 20 years, but that is massive. And that's what the whole Clone Wars was in part about. Like, so the fact that he was thinking about this stuff a good 20 years before he ever made them is impressive.
And then I think one of my favorite little things here is that I believe all 3 of the first movies had National Public Radio Network adaptations. And for this movie, in 1983, they put out the radio adaptation. Mark Hamill reprised his role, Billy D. Williams his, Anthony Daniels his, and someone that joined the cast for the radio play of this is John Lithgow as Yoda. I kind of want to listen to this.
It's not bad. Now, I don't know how those things go because they don't do them anymore on the radio. So is that essentially them reading the script without all the bells and whistles?
Well, no, you read the script and then you add like the sound effects and
wow.
And you make it a theater of the mind. Yes,
Sure,
when I was in college,
is there a narrator too?
You might have a narrator sometimes.
Okay.
You might just have the dialogue tell you what's happening. Mac, I did 3 of these when I was in school.
Wow.
By myself. I voiced all the characters and did all the sound effects.
What movies did you do?
I did an old what's it called? I'm gonna blank on the name, but it was a Doc Savage play. I don't know. You don't know old radio, but I did a Doc Savage. I wrote one myself. It was about a haunted house.
All right. How about that?
It might still be on my SoundCloud.
Those were the days of Black and Goo.
Yes.
All right.
Shall we get to the Decagon?
Yes, let's do that.
Fun factor, and I think that Han Solo truly is, because I think character-wise, it's split up like you get about 40% Luke, 40% Han, maybe even third of Han, Luke, and Vader. And the stuff with Han is wildly fun.
Yeah, Han Solo is awesome. And you get a peek into his wider doings in this movie because he now gets connected to not only Lando, but Jabba in this movie. So you're like, oh, there's a whole sort of life lived before he was ever thrust into this journey here.
Well, he was a scoundrel.
Sure, yeah, but it really rounds him out as a character, and it really makes you interested into what he was doing before he got introduced to the Skywalkers. As a kid, easily the most fun character for me was Yoda because he's an enigma. Everything he says makes no sense. It's backwards. It's just a lot of fun as a kid trying to talk like Yoda.
But then also, after watching the prequels and then realizing this movie comes out 20 years-ish, what's the gap between
Phantom Menace and this is 19 years, Attack of the Clones and this is 22, and Sith is 25.
No, you're adding years. You should be taking years away.
I'm saying when they came out.
No, but I'm saying the timeline of that movie to episode 3 to episode 4.
So how long Yoda has aged?
Yeah.
I think Luke's 18 at this, so there's 18 years between the first movie and Sith, so 21.
So let's say 21
between this and Sith.
So Yoda has been on Dagobah for 20 years, let's say.
Roughly, yeah.
His brain has become mush.
Complete mush. Now, as much as I have loved that Lucas went on and expanded the fuck out of this universe, it really does hurt these original 3 movies sometimes because a character will do something or say something and you're like, wait a second, that like makes absolutely no fucking sense, but they can't go back and change it now because it's been that way for X amount of years. And there's actually like 2 or 3 instances in this movie where I'm like, hold on, that makes this look really stupid now.
What I would have preferred is if in the prequels, Yoda was either already kind of crazy or he was like, I am here. I am the Jedi Council leader. And he speaks normal, straight sentence.
Yeah.
And then just from being on Dagobah by himself, he just starts talking backwards.
Yeah, you could definitely buy into some of the zaniness that Yoda has in this, just by being by himself for 20 years. But if they should have given us an inkling of that character in the prequel trilogies, because he is a fun character, even while he's all knowing and whatnot. Like, they should have given us a little bit of that. They really did. They did Yoda a disservice, and by doing the character a disservice, they do this movie a disservice by not doing some of that.
And all I could think about too is at the end of episode 3 when he's like, into exile, I must go. I would have been great if he opened up his ship and Dagobah is just like, fuck. I used to live in a palace.
Yeah, now I'm in a fucking swamp.
I gotta eat bugs.
Although, to be fair, it does look like Yoda's creature, Yoda's type would eat bugs and snakes too.
That's a good point. Satisfactor. Is this the best cliffhanger of all time?
In 1980, I think for sure, definitely. Your first time running through this movie, it's got to be up there. It's on the short list for sure. It's hard to come up with something better than this, because you get the simultaneous learning about Vader being Luke and Leia's father on top of an incomplete ending. You're like, we still got a lot of things to do here. Like, it's a really bold decision to make by everyone that made this movie, most notably Lucas, because as much as we love this movie and it improves upon a lot of things in the first movie, it's a pretty incomplete ending.
I think it's exactly what they wanted. They knew they had 2 movies to play with.
Sure, I agree. I'm just saying it's a bold choice because
I love it.
No one had ever done this before.
I love it, baby.
It's a bold choice for sure.
Also one of the greatest oh fuck moments to end a movie as well.
I also think now upon rewatches, which I'll touch upon this point a little bit more in a few minutes, I think Jedi is way more rewatchable because this sets up Jedi on a silver platter. You start out more fun, the pacing's better, you end with an incredibly satisfying conclusion that you don't get here.
I mean, this movie also fleshed out most of the characters so that Jedi didn't have to.
This movie did a lot of the dirty work, for
Although
sure.
I think that Jedi might have done a better job with Leia.
Yeah, I think they start thinking about, we need a better female lead instead of her just being like here also.
Like, oh, I find that hunk to be hunky. Yeah. That's kind of her thing in this movie, right?
Yeah. Although they do throw her in a metal bikini in 3, so
yes. Yeah. They're like, look, we're gonna flesh out your character a little bit more once you show us some.
Yeah, show us a little TNA, and then we'll, you feed me, I feed you.
Bore-ometer. Was anything in this movie boring? I don't think so.
For me, there was.
Okay.
There was. Obviously, we've seen this movie a million times, so I'm really just kind of wanted to skip through the middle 30 minutes here. It just kind of comes screeching to a halt. Luke crash lands in Dagobah around 45 minutes in, and we don't get to Cloud City until an hour and 20 minutes in. So that is a good 35 minutes where not a ton is happening. You just have Yoda kind of dancing around.
Yeah, I like the Yoda stuff. I like the Han Solo stuff.
In the asteroid. I'm not saying I don't like it. It's just when you're rewatching the movie, there's a little bit of a bore there because not much happens.
All right, Mac, I know that we've been doing monkeying around on here, but that doesn't apply here, I don't think. So let's in this Star Wars movie, was anything a Star Chores for this movie? Was anything a Star Bore? And I would say that C-3PO really fucking stinks in this movie. But what I appreciate is every character in this movie agrees.
You have a lifelong vendetta against C-3PO, and I respect that. I don't need to speak any more words towards that. I think not that it's a chore, but jumping off the conversation we're having, the more and more you think about Yoda and what he's doing and saying on Dagobah is kind of frustrating. Like that should have been better, or he should have been better in the prequel trilogy. Obviously, it would have been easier to make him better in the prequel trilogy, but the fact is, he's 2 completely different characters, and it's frustrating. It's definitely frustrating.
And obviously, they didn't have the full backstory of what happens in Phantom at this point, but I also would have loved it if when Luke was like, I trained with Yoda, and Vader's like, but you're so fucking old. They wanted to throw me out at 6.
Yeah, so if you want to, again, things in the new trilogy or a new Star Wars lore that really make this unravel is if Anakin was too old to train at 10, Luke is
6.
far too old to train
He
at
was 6,
18.
wasn't he?
He was 10.
Was he 10? I don't know. Fuck it.
Well, he was playing 10 as like an 8-year-old or something like
Okay.
that. Or
So
playing 8 as a 6-year-old. I don't know. Whatever the fuck it
regardless,
was.
older. That's
Yeah.
older. Okay.
But apparently Luke at 18 is cool.
Halloween, and I don't know if I get as much enjoyment out of it, but I think I have more appreciation for this movie as time goes on.
Yeah. Again, this is not my favorite rewatch of the original 3. In fact, it might be third of the 3 to rewatch them. But this does so much dirty work to set up Return of the Jedi that you have to appreciate it for what it does. And just in the grand scheme of things, like as a fan of movies and movie making and cinema history, this does so much for everyone and everything on that front.
It's better than Aquaman.
For sure.
When life gives you lemons,
Mm.
you make lemonade. And I believe that James Earl Jones, his voiceover work in this movie, wow. Like, he adds such gravitas to what could be kind of a one-note character, but the way that, and it's not even just his deep voice, it's the way that his sentences flow, the way that he decides to pause after certain words or mid-word. It's so powerful. It's so good.
He's asked to do, he's not a one-note character in this movie,
No.
as he is in the first one. He's asked to do a lot more. And you see both in his conversations with Palpatine and with Luke, what like the wide range and what his grand scheme might be. And so it's really hard to reflect that in a robotic voice, but James Earl Jones does an incredible job with that. My Plemonade here is Billy D. Williams. He looks awesome as Lando Calrissian.
Got a
You don't
cape.
know. Yeah, the cape is, I don't know why he has it, but it looks fucking cool.
Can you start wearing a cape?
Just with the little two things on the
With
side.
the little
too.
two things on the side.
And like that, the small little dialogue about him and Han's past, you're just like really intrigued by this character. So Billy D for sure.
Max Credit Union. I got a couple people you got to give credit to. George Lucas, I think, just nails everything that he's going for in this movie. And it's flipping and reversing A New Hope.
Sure, from it when they've been yet.
Where he just doesn't go with the carbon copy of like, here's the hero's journey again. No, we start with the hero in peril. We start with a battle this time, and then we ease into character study, and then you end it with the bad guys win. That's George Lucas right there, baby.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like it's again, like I said, it was a bold strategy to make this movie the way they did. And when you're watching, if you were to watch these 3 movies in a row every time, which I actually do quite often, today I just watched this and Return of the Jedi. This movie fits in much more comfortably, and you forgive some of the table setting because you're jumping into Jedi immediately. But if you were to just watch this movie on its own, I don't think it's as good upon rewatch as 1 and 3. I'm not saying it's not better, when you're ranking movies in the grand scheme of things, because the first time you watch this, that has to play. That jaw drop moment has to matter. But if you were gonna go pick out a movie today to rewatch of the 3, I think this would be third.
Give credit to Industrial Lights and Magic. They did a very good job for it being 1980. And then Frank Oz for helping to bring Yoda to life.
Yeah, the Yoda character obviously was my favorite as a kid. It's such a zany thing. And like when you try talking like Yoda for that next 6 months, I'm sure your parents were fucking real annoyed. So everyone had to deal with that.
I also love how Yoda, before he would tell a joke, would laugh because he knew it was going to be funny.
Goo, I feel like everyone in this movie that came back from the first movie is simply better. So credit to everyone, but especially Harrison Ford, who like is a bona fide star in this movie.
Superstar.
And you had talked about it a little bit a few minutes ago. He's easily the best character in this movie.
Pants Tent City. Excite Bike Mania. The battle on Hoth at the beginning of the movie. First off, starting the movie 15-ish minutes in with that battle, I think it looks great. The AT-ATs are fucking cool as shit. We really got nothing up until was it The Last Jedi where we had anything that even looked like snow? I believe that was a salt planet that they had
It
with
was
that
salt
battle.
in that movie,
But
yes.
that one, this just looks so unique compared to the rest of the Star Wars stuff.
Yeah, and I think they shot that on location in like Finland or Norway, somewhere up there, which is impressive. I will say the Empire gets to Hoth awfully quick and drops all that equipment on Hoth awfully quick. A little too much, a little too quick for my taste.
They had
but-
3 years.
For me, the pants set in this movie is the like 10, maybe even 12 minutes. I should have timed it in the third act here, where it's just Luke and Vader kind of going through Cloud City, and it's simultaneously awesome, but also kind of spooky. There's a little like alien elements to it here too.
It is, but also it might have some of the goofiest stuff in the movie.
There's one moment in particular
where Vader is throwing boxes at him and Luke's like,
oh no,
"Eh."
like 5 minutes before that, when he almost just jumps off the platform, and you're like, what? That's the strongest guy in the universe, and he just
You
one
weren't
lightsaber.
laughing when he was just throwing boxes at him and Luke couldn't hit the
No,
boxes?
because then he's using Force stuff, so I'm good with that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was laughing at Luke not being able to make contact with the boxes.
Yeah, that's what I was
The
laughing
worst
at.
hand-eye coordination in
Yeah.
the goddamn galaxy.
They're big fucking boxes.
Yeah, he's up there swinging like fucking Pedro Serrano. It's incredible.
Yeah, they were all curveballs. They were fastballs. Home runs. For those of you tardy to the Mac and Goo party, we rate everything on a 40 hot dog rating system. Mac, I love how they did not follow the blueprint of A New Hope. This was not a hero's journey. This movie comes out guns a-blazing and does a fantastic job of building the characters of Han Solo, Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, and what they do here as well is you now know that Darth Vader is not in charge. But it's not like the third one where he seems like he's just under the thumb of the Emperor, which I don't love about Return of the Jedi. In this one, it still seems like Vader's in charge. He just has, someone slightly above him in management who he has to report to.
I think you're overstating it a little bit, though, because Vader in this movie sets the seeds for overthrowing the Emperor. So he's sort of playing a beta bitch intentionally. He's trying to ease Palpatine's mind for sure.
Harrison Ford's Han Solo charm is just so effortless. The reluctant hero is played out so well in this movie. James Earl Jones's voice, just the voiceover work that he does with Vader just brings life to this character and truly makes him, I believe AFI had him as the number 3 villain of all time. And if you're looking at most iconic villains of all time, he's probably number 1.
Yeah, he definitely might be.
Yoda's fun. Simple enough. Yoda's just fun.
Yoda's a blast.
I wish
Still
that I
love
was
Yoda.
able to watch this movie with the original special effects to see how the stop motion looked, but I'm never going to be able to see that unless they put it on YouTube and I can see that. That'd be great. Knowing that you're in the middle of a trilogy, I think they did the best job of, this is a 3-chapter story. This is the middle chapter. We don't need to end it here. We're going to end it with the next one. So let's just build up all these characters to the best that we can. And they did that. My only issue is that C-3PO sucks, but every other character knows that. 40 hot dogs. 40 hot dogs.
Yeah, sorry. To expound upon your point there, if my research is correct, this is the middle chapter of 3 trilogies.
You are correct.
So the fact that like they're setting notes in this to play out in further chapters other than chapter 5 is very impressive. Everyone in this movie does a better job than they did in the first movie, and it definitely pays off because they're asked to do more. They're not asked to do a ton of hard acting in the first movie. Building out the universe works really well. It serves as an awesome setup for the conclusion to this trilogy. The final 40 minutes of this movie, 40, 45, as soon as they get to Cloud City and on, is fucking awesome. But I have to admit, the pacing's a little off before the final act.
Yeah, but movies hadn't invented pacing by that point yet, though.
Give it whatever excuse you want. It's just, to me, again, before I even finish my spiel, there's a 40 hot dog movie. All 3 of
Hell
these
yeah,
movies.
we did it.
All 3 of the original trilogy to me are 40 hot dog movies. So we're fucking splicing hairs here, but I have a really hard time justifying this movie over Return of the Jedi these days. The middle 34 minutes of Empire is pretty slow. There's no real slow moments in Jedi. The pacing is better. There's more action. It's more fun. It's more campy. Don't people love the campiness of Star Wars?
No.
It opens with the Empire back on the Death Star. You get Palpatine as a real character finally, other than just a hologram. You know, the good guys start in Jabba's place. You get all that hijinks. You get Luke's green lightsaber.
Don't get me wrong. The beginning of Jedi is amazing. Maybe one of the best openings of all time.
The full part of
Yes.
Jedi. Again, it's hard. I'm not trying to discount the incredible things that this movie does and the jaw drop moment that this movie gives you. It's just really hard in 2024 to say that this is better than Return of the Jedi. In 1983, I'm sure half the Star Wars universe or audience, if not more, preferred Empire over Jedi. Now, I don't know if that's the case. There's a lot of love for Jedi out there, Goo. It's my favorite Star Wars.
People also
movie.
love the fucking Phantom Menace and Clone Wars, so shut up.
I'm just saying Return of the Jedi is my favorite Star Wars movie, and this rewatch only certified that more, if that makes sense. But again, 40 Hot Dog Movie. I love this movie. I think you and I love Star Wars more than most of our audience. There's obviously a segment that, you know, likes it less than us, but might like certain movies more than others. So I feel like we're allowed to criticize Star Wars the way we do. It's fucking dominated our whole lives. I have been living and breathing Star Wars since the moment my father showed it to me, maybe even before the VHS stuff, because we would have been 8 years old then, and I had to have seen it before that. I must have seen it before that, because these movies from my father, Star Wars, the original one, came out when my dad was 8. So like, he no doubt showed me these movies very early on. It's just been, Star Wars has dominated my life for better or worse.
All right, so double 40. I have it as my number one Star Wars.
I have this in the top 3 of Star Wars.
So just say your third then.
I could go back and forth on this and the original, the first one, A New Hope. I think Jedi is definitely number 1 for me, though.
All right, shall we do a little timelining?
Yeah, let's do a little timelining.
You can do it.
Okay. We open on Hoth with Luke and Han riding those tauntauns in the middle of a blizzard. And of course, the imagery here is great because we haven't seen anything like this in Star Wars on that snowy planet.
I thought they smelled bad from the outside.
Han is getting ready to leave Hoth because he mentions Jabba has a price on his head, which this was the first note I took. That's pretty stupid. You're at a hidden base in the middle of nowhere. Jabba's never going to find you. That's really dumb
It's a
motivation
good place
for
to
a
hide.
character.
Yeah,
really good place to hide. In fact, the best place to hide, I would argue. They do mention a bounty hunter he ran into here, so that is the first instance of like bounty hunters in the universe, which is cool. Han goes back out to save Luke. They end up staying in the guts of the Tauntaun. Luke slices up. That's not a bantha, is it? Bantha's in Jabba's palace. I forget what animal that is on Hoth there. I forget what it's called. This is where that 10% of our listeners can chime in and tell us what the fuck. We need Chris Siderick on the horn right now. We also this is a fun fact that we forgot to mention. I don't even know it's a fun fact. It's just a fact. Mark Hamill got in a pretty severe accident in between the filming of these two movies. Wampa, that's what it is. Wampa, good call. Good fingers there. Hamill got in some sort of accident between these two movies. So this opening scene is intentional by Lucas because he had to write into the movie why Luke has facial scars, and him writing this in was him getting scratched by the Wampa at the beginning of the movie. So that's pretty cool there. We get them all teaming up after they're saved. Leia kisses Luke in a pretty impassioned kiss.
That's after she sees him in one of those diaper tubes. And she's like, I gotta get me some of this.
And at this point, I think, and this is just with hindsight, we're pretty sure Leia knows that Luke's her brother by this point.
I don't know. And I don't think that they had that planned out quite yet. Like as writers.
Yeah, so that goes into the Vader thing too, with Lucas planning out this whole universe. I'm not sure when they pinpointed that either. But it's an awkward kiss knowing what we know
but Luke
now.
Also, he looks so satisfied. It's as if
he does. He essentially
likes tying games at home. Yeah.
We get the Imperial March, obviously, which is an incredible score.
Yeah.
We get the first look at Darth Vader without his helmet. and it's just the like backside of his head, side profile back of his head.
So that was to show the audience that he was not a droid.
Yeah, which is a great thing to show that like there's still a human underneath there.
Yeah.
You know, he's not completely robotic the way that Obi-Wan basically says he is in this movie.
I also love how at one point in this movie, he is able to choke someone through FaceTime.
So this is my second note. We've seen a lot of powers in the Star Wars universe, and I don't doubt that Vader would be able to do this. It just seems bizarre since he hasn't done it since. No one's done it since. I don't know how he was able to FaceTime choke someone here. It's sort of inexplicable.
I think they made it a rule.
We get the Falcon escaping from Vader's destroyer. They go into that asteroid. Luke crash lands on Dagobah. This is about 45 minutes in. Into exile for Yoda here. You start pondering what his 20 years has been like on rewatches like we have, because you're like, hold on a second. If you go back and rewatch anything with Yoda prior to this movie, he is not this character. So he must be real fucked up. But
masturbation, I am sick of.
And then he turns into the real Jedi Master, Yoda, and trains Luke. But you're like, what? He's still being kind of zany though too. I don't know. It's a little frustrating.
Also, shout out seagulls. Bad lip reading. Run, 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 jump. That could be your backpack while you run.
Shouldn't R2 know who Yoda is?
So the R2 C3PO stuff is a little off because of the prequels, but I just kind of look past it.
That's another thing that's a bit bothersome too, especially since R2 and Luke can communicate. So that's bizarre. I don't really care for that. Just like the Obi-Wan stuff from the first movie. We learn that Luke is Anakin's son 53 minutes in, aka Darth Vader's son. I don't know if we know Vader is Anakin until Vader tells us that though.
Right. And we don't. But also, I almost would have preferred if he didn't tell him that, and Vader, because, Force sensitivity, was able to figure out by himself.
Well, also, the original release doesn't have that scene. So the 1980 movie doesn't have Palpatine telling Vader that this is Anakin's son.
Okay.
That's a later edition.
Because I don't think that we need it.
You're probably right. You're probably right about that. Luke has that Vader vision on Dagobah, which scared the fuck out of me as a kid, where he chops at Vader and then it's Luke's head behind the mask. Scared the shit out of me. Finally, we get the Millennium Falcon landing on Cloud City an hour and 20 minutes into this movie, setting up the third act of the movie where Vader is basically using them as bait, knowing Luke's going to come and try to save them. This is where we get the different Han pronunciations. This is my fourth or fifth note now on things that are fucking ridiculous from this movie. C-3PO venturing into that room and just getting blasted by some unnamed character off screen. Preposterous. What the fuck is that?
Let him die.
Some guy's like, hey, what are you doing in here? And
Let him die. Let him die.
We then get to a line from Force Ghost Obi-Wan on Dagobah when Yoda, after Luke leaves, he says, that boy is our last hope. Well, I don't know if you remembered the Obi-Wan series that just came out a couple years ago. It's very clear he believes in Leia. So not only did that series suck, this just made Obi-Wan look like a fucking idiot in this movie, because very clearly, if you go by Obi-Wan's own actions, he wouldn't believe that Luke is their last hope.
Oh, I also love how Lando Calrissian pronounces Chewbacca.
Lando betraying Han here is frustrating, but he doesn't have a choice, right? Like, what are you going to do when Vader just shows up on Cloud City? You have to abide by whatever the fuck he tells you to do. Then, of course, Vader double crosses him. Han getting frozen in carbonite strictly to be a test freeze for Luke is like a funny note that I always forget until I rewatch this. They're like, fuck it, throw Han in there and see if it works. Like,
also maybe one of the most iconic things in sci-fi movies.
Oh, it's great. I would say the look of Han in that frozen panel is so fucking perfect. That's my favorite thing from this movie is the carbonite panel of Han. It is fucking great.
What would have been funny? Cool. Is if he had a fear boner. Just poking out.
And then, of course, you get the "I love you, I
Yeah,
know"
yeah.
line here, which coincides with the carbonite. Other than the Vader Luke stuff, is my favorite stuff from the movie easily. We also get a little thing in here, Goo, as everyone's scurrying away as Luke's making entry, and Leia yells to Luke, "It's a trap." I just love that that's a common thing in the Star Wars universe. During this face-off between Vader and Luke on that carbonite platform, Vader is very easily pushed off the platform by Luke, and I think it's absolutely fucking preposterous. And even the way they shoot it, like cinematography wise, it's a down angle, and you just see Vader like jump backwards with his cape, and you're like, what the fuck was that? That was dumb.
Do you think it's like the first one where it's just him playing with his food? Because he has several chances to end Luke's life.
It's a little bit of that because then like 30 seconds later, he's stalking Luke in the hallway. So
Yeah.
it is a bit of that Michael Myers thing, I guess. And this is where we get to the scene where he's throwing all sorts of shit at Luke. And I don't know how Luke can't make contact. It's not small stuff, it's big shit.
It's big
All he's
block
gonna do is this.
Yeah.
I don't understand it. And he has both hands right
And he's
now in this scene.
whimpering the whole time.
Lando helps Leia, Chewie, 3PO, R2 escape on the Falcon. He goes with them. And then we get the scene underneath, or sort of in the center underneath of Cloud City, where Vader chops off Luke's hand. Luke's kind of scampering away, and Vader tells you, "Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father. No, I am your father."
Mhm.
And this is, and again, this is maybe why it gets rated so highly. Not the only reason why, but I can only imagine what this would have been like for a 10-year-old me, even an 18-year-old me, a 25-year-old me in the movie theater, building up this hate towards Vader and rooting for Luke, and then you find out it's his dad, and you're like, oh, I bet it took people minutes, hours to like really process that and be like, hold the fucking phone. And so then the anticipation for the next movie goes through the roof,
Huge.
obviously. It's just a great fucking moment in cinematic history. You could argue the best moment in cinematic history. It's just fucking really, really cool. During this scene, too, after he reveals he's Luke's father, he then pitches to Luke that the two of them can lead the Empire and dispatch the Emperor, which sets the groundwork and again rounds out the Vader character a little bit better for that third movie and the stuff with the Emperor. I think that was a nice piece of dialogue in there.
Also,
then,
James Earl Jones thought that he was lying when he told him that.
oh, that would be a nice thing to tell the actor too. And you know what? I bet half the fandom thought that as well. I never really considered that. Yeah, that's a good point right there. Obviously, Luke falls down the fucking chute, ends up on the little antenna underneath Cloud City here, and he calls out to Ben, which doesn't do anything, and then calls out to Leia. They're driving away, flying away in the Falcon. Leia can hear Luke's like call,
Yeah.
And so it's showing that Leia is somewhat force sensitive, which
Yeah.
I guess a lot of people's issues with Leia in the new trilogy was that they made her like overpowered.
Yeah.
But at least they laid the groundwork early on that she was force sensitive.
But also, if you if you just look at this in a vacuum, you could have thought that maybe Luke was able to do that with his force sensitivity, just, send out a message like that.
Right. That's
and then
true.
knowing
too.
how
Yeah.
it is in the future, that she trained and all that shit, that
Yeah.
it's hard.
And then as Luke and the Millennium Falcon are escaping, Vader reaches out to Luke. They kind of have a small little conversation there. Luke gets back to the rebellion. They give him his robot prosthetic hand. And then we get this final shot, which this might be my favorite shot of the three movies, of Luke and Leia plus the two droids looking out into space as Lando and Chewie fly off with the Falcon, presumably to go save Han. It's a really, there's a lot going on in this shot where, wow, we've lost, but there's still hope, there's still something to go forward here. It's an incomplete story as is, but it is a somewhat fulfilling incomplete story, almost in the way we've talked about Across the Spider-Verse, right?
Yeah.
You get this cliffhanger of an ending, but because the cliffhanger was so good, there's this fulfilling, satisfying feeling surrounding the movie. So
Yeah, because at the end of this movie, you're saying, okay, in 3 years from now, we're going to see them save Han, and we're going to see how Luke deals with, his father now.
Yeah. I watched Return of the Jedi right after this, and I just had much more fun watching Jedi. But again, watching this right before Jedi did help the Jedi rewatch. So there is that.
40 hot dogs.
40 hot dogs.
Let's get into Maxac.
And Maxac could be anything it could be about. And this week, Mac, little housekeeping for us. On June 19th, 2024, that is a Wednesday, we'll be at Idle Hands Craft Ales, 8 and 9 Commercial Street, Malden, Massachusetts, for Harry Potter movie trivia.
Harry
Part
Potter.
What is the second Harry Potter movie? I'm blanking.
Chamber of Secrets.
This is our Chamber of Secrets.
I might make that one of the categories when I've been looking at the movies.
Do that.
Last one we did, Prisoner of Azkaban, was one of the categories. It might be Chamber of Secrets for this.
I like that. I'm in on that. So come on, come all. We had a great time doing Harry Potter last time. It was actually, we had a lightning round, like the little bolt in his head.
Yes, that's right. We had a Harry Potter, maybe even more than like Star Wars fandom, has a deep, deep love. Like Star Wars fandom, it might be 5% of the fans. The people that love Harry Potter and like know all the like ins and outs, it's like 50% of the fans. Like they're just more dedicated, I think, than most.
And they
other
also
fandoms.
they're less loathing of their franchise.
For sure. Although getting into the Fantastic Beasts stuff like that has,
but a lot of people just don't count them.
Though they properly gave it a different name instead of calling it, Harry Potter episode 10,
Yeah. Also, quick heads up, on tpublic.com, they have finally, after years of demand, they have added hats to the mix of what you can do with your merch. I believe it looks like a trucker hat, kind of.
Yeah.
Or a dad hat.
Those are the two styles I got. Yep.
Yep. And I'll tell you right now, some of our designs look fucking crisp.
I'll tell you right now, I won't be buying one. I have too many hats. I got to get rid of some hats, actually. So,
do you want to give some hats away? Are they sweaty? Are they gross?
I'll have to double check. I got in my closet. I have a rotation of about 10 I wear regularly.
Mm-hmm.
I probably got another 30 in my closet. Just
don't forget, you have to keep 2 of them to eat.
That's right. I do owe 2 hats from previous bets.
And then also, John, I'll mail your shirt soon.
There you go. How about that?
I'll head to the post office. All right, Mac, where can the people find us?
You can find us on Twitter and on Instagram. By the way, huge news on Twitter now, X, now XXX. Porn's back, baby.
Hasn't it always been there?
Yeah, it's always been there. Now it's allowed, though.
Yeah, but I say that was the go-to spot. That's the only spot, really.
We're on X, XXX, and Instagram at Mac and Goo Podcast. Every other platform, we are Mac & Goo.
And we're going to start tweeting out full penetration, nonstop.
That includes Facebook, Stitcher, TuneIn, Castbox, Spreaker, Google Play, iHeartRadio. We are on Spotify, but more importantly, on Apple Podcasts. Get on there, subscribe, rate, review 5 stars. If you do that, you'll get a free t-shirt like John from the folks over at Watertown Sportswear. That's Watertown Sportswear on 34 Mount Auburn Street in Watertown. WatertownSportswear.com, expert screen printing and embroidery.
tpublic.com. Don't forget, we have hats. So go and check out That's a Chunky. Those hats look fucking great because Billy D does the design. It's as if he knows what he's doing. The Mac and Goo ones look fine. The Dork ones look great. So please buy more stuff.
Yeah. Either way,
Father's Day is coming up. Dads love this shit.
Either way.
Yeah. Get your 80-something-year-old dad a nice corncob TV hat.
Yeah. Tell them it's a new streaming platform.
Maybe that. Maybe some sloppy steaks. I don't even want to be around anymore. It's all good stuff. Check us out at the end of the week for a news dump, and then next week we're gonna need another new topic.
Yeah, you might be right. I thought I don't know. The Boys comes out. In like a week and a half. So maybe we can do something attached to that.
There's nothing attached to that.
I don't know.
That's a good point. All right. Tuesdays are Goose Days. I abuse kangaroos.
Bye.
And Burton.
Please flip the cassette over to side B to continue the adventure.